So welcome once again to our Sarah Smith Superstar Parents. I am Emily Boatwright, and this is our second reopening town hall for the second semester. On this call, I have with me Davy Portee, Assistant Principal.
Good morning.
Jennifer Berry, who is our instructional coach.
Good morning.
For those that need translation services, Katia Orozco is available, and she has placed that information in the chat. And I'm not going to pretend to be able to do that. But we are excited that you all are joining us. We had a great turnout last night. Many of our staff members were able to join us. Paula Webb, Assistant Principal, and Jessica Herron, Program Administrator, will also be joining this call momentarily. So until then, I may be wearing multiple hats, but we will make it all work. So second semester reopening, we're all so excited. Our norms for this meeting, there are a lot of strong opinions around reopening. We value that. We're really focused in this meeting on what's in the interest of our students. So we ask that our participants are present, value and recognize all perspectives, really put students at the center of our thinking, be solutions oriented, assume goodwill, because while we may disagree, it is not coming from a place of, it's coming from a good place. And then you can ask questions in the chat. There are a couple of times in this presentation where we have stopping points to ask questions, and you can ask them along the way. And I will probably either, if it's appropriate, address them at that time or wait till one of those stopping points. I may also say that will come up in a later part of the presentation. So if you'll be patient. I do go through the chat and try to make sure that all questions are answered before the meeting ends. So hopefully we find that beneficial. But there are some things we are not going to be able to answer at this time because we don't have all the information that we need. So today we're going to look at the reopening models and review what's going to happen second semester. Present an updated plan of how APS will provide different learning options in the second semester and help you guys make an informed decision, or as informed as we are right now, regarding what's best for you and your family second semester. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the CDC indicators for dynamic school decision-making chart. I know that we've seen this in all of our meetings, but the biggest thing I want to highlight is because we are in a level of spread, that means that we must do mitigation strategies in order to maintain a safe learning environment for all of our students and staff, as well as our larger community, because once they leave Sarah Smith, they venture out, everyone who's here ventures out and interacts with different community members. So we want to do our part to keep our community as healthy and safe as possible. Mitigation strategies are really key to us having a successful reopening and relaunch. I know I've watched neighboring school districts and independent schools reopen, and I'm trying to take the best practices that we're able to implement as well as the recommendations of the CDC. So the first thing I'm going to encourage is, or that is a requirement for APS, in fact, is consistent and correct use of masks. I don't know if you can see my picture in the corner, but your mask must cover from your nose to your chin. It shouldn't be below the nose. It shouldn't be, above the chin. It really needs to bubble in your nose and mouth. And please work with your students over the break, if you intend to return to in-person learning, on practicing wearing a mask for a long period of time, as well as trying out several different options for masks to make sure that you have the correct fit for your child. We do have 2 reusable masks per student that we will give out, as well as 2 reusable masks per adult in our building, teachers, staff members. But some people, now it's a personal choice, they like certain fits. I do prefer the masks that are just, disposable. I like the way that they feel. I've tried the N95s and sometimes it rubs on my chin. But my daughter loves those. So we've experimented with masks, and I just encourage you all to do that. We are finding on our Wednesday intervention days when we have students in the building, some do and do not have the best fit masks. And some students are still struggling to keep the mask on for the 2.5 hours that they're here. Now we're going back to a traditional school day. So please practice that. That's the biggest thing we can all do to set ourselves up for success. Social distancing to the greatest extent possible is also part of our mitigation strategies. And so we are looking at not only the 60% capacity, which we will talk about for our overall enrollment, but also individual room capacities as well. And then what creativity and flexibility do we need to have in cases where the students in a particular classroom would like to come back, but that room is not physically large enough. And luckily that's not a very large problem for us. It's in a couple of isolated cases. So we are examining options all the time. Hand hygiene, respiratory etiquette. So that's washing your hands, really getting those thumbs good, the back of the hands, the palm of the hands. I watched a lot of videos early on and felt like I was an expert really getting up in there. Soap and water are definitely the best, but we also, hand sanitizer is great in a pinch, and we have a lot of sanitizing stations that have been installed throughout our building and classrooms. Respiratory etiquette is also important. It's something I've worked on with my children since they were little, and still have to correct. But you got your mask on, have a backup mask if you need to change that out. If you're outside or somewhere where you're not wearing a mask, to sneeze into your elbow, not your hand, and not just spraying out into the world. For us, cleaning and disinfecting, also very, very important. The district did provide fogging machines at each campus. After our students are in person on these current Wednesdays, our custodial staff is going around and fogging the common areas and classrooms as on Thursday. So we have a reduced staff here. That will shift to Wednesdays when we return to 4-day-a-week face-to-face instruction. So that's why Wednesdays are asynchronous, but so that we can really get in and do the deep clean and disinfecting. And then contact tracing and collaboration with the local health department. I do want to give a shout out to our own health services, our nursing manager, Valencia Hildreth. She has been a great thought partner as we have had students come back to school. And I will say it's, everything is a case by case basis. So a lot of times parents want hard, fast answers. If this, then what? And unfortunately, I can say in some cases, like, yes, if we have an outbreak, which is defined as 2 cases that can only be linked back to the school and not their own household, there are certain protocols, but many things it's a case by case basis. And we were really calling to say they were, these 2 people were 12 feet apart for 7 minutes or 6 feet apart for 20 minutes, and she kind of, but then here are these other factors, and she's able to talk through to say green light or red light and err on the side of caution. I will go ahead and tell you I am a caution queen, because I'd rather err on the side of caution at this time and keep as many people healthy and safe and keep our school doors open than the reverse. And we are a little, we don't exercise due caution, and we have to have larger shutdowns. So that's going to be our goal here at Sarah Smith. Healthy, safe. And we are all superstars. That includes all of our families and community members, and we just appreciate you all for your continued support. As we're, I hate to say it, but navigating all these uncharted waters, like it every day it's something different. So again, this is our Return Plus Learn Phase 2. Remember, our goal is to promote the academic, mental, social, and emotional well-being of all students, and physical. I've left off physical. We want to make sure that we are really keeping our students the whole child in mind throughout this process. Some questions have been asked around what has APS done to make the schools safe for return. And this is an enlarged chart. They have these, this has been a graphic that APS has used frequently. And I am personally very proud of the investments that our district has made to date. They have made $68 million in upgrading to our heating, ventilation, and HVAC systems. Some were, really problematic. I will say since I've been back on campus, I've seen air filters swap out. I've had meetings where they've talked around how many times an hour the air within the classrooms circulate, as well as how many times an hour they pull in fresh air, which means they're pushing out air that's been in the building. And HVAC is a huge consideration when we were talking around the spread of an airborne virus. And as I said, I've even been in my office and they have changed the filters right here with me. We're all wearing our masks. And a lot of times I think the perception is that our masks are not, our filters may not, maybe not changed as frequently or might not be super clean, but even some of our teachers who saw filters changed commented to me, they really didn't look gross, and that's amazing. So even pre-COVID, the district was doing things right. You just don't always hear about it. They also are, one thing that I like is they're making sure that our start time for our air to run in buildings goes to 3 hours before occupation. So it takes a little more money, as we all know from running our own heating and cooling systems at home, but that increases the circulation time for the air and make sure that things are working effectively. We have been tested for Legionnaires. All schools they're running through testing schools. I'm just waiting on the district to make sure we can share any results we're getting, but not a traumatic concern for Sarah Smith. The district did install bottled water filling stations in buildings, but luckily Sarah Smith PTO had been very proactive and they installed those at both campuses some time ago. We're continuing to flush and run water, so every day people are coming through and turning on sinks and letting water flow around our buildings. As I mentioned, the fogging machines are in the buildings, and I've taken some pictures, posted those on Twitter. There's, other people have posted them in their buildings as well, so those are being used. We really appreciate those. There are daily wipe downs. We started that before we left in COVID, wiping down especially things that are high frequency touch, propping doors open when possible. Again, hand sanitizers. The building capacity for 60% just means that we are not trying to run putting 25 students in all of our classrooms, but if we have flexibility in how we use our space to make sure that we are able to social distance. Limited use of our facilities by outside organizations, that's come up several times, but just right now, it's a lot. We want to make sure that we're focused on keeping our staff and students healthy and safe, and the more folks we let in, the more folks that we have to screen, the more folks we may ultimately have to do contact tracing with. Where APS is working on a COVID testing strategy, and I've heard some things from others, again, from other schools, and use of different testing options, but they are looking at one that meets the needs of our students and staff. PPE for students and staff, again, we have the masks, we have that just are really key to this. We have screening measures. I know that some school districts do and don't have different measures and ask different questions. We follow the questions from the CDC. Again, social distancing and limiting our class sizes and the people who are able to access the buildings. it's going to be key. All mitigation strategies that will help us stay, be able to launch in-person instruction and maintain that. I'm not going to speak at length here, but if you've missed one of our board meetings, this is something that they are consistently working on. I've had, again, several conversations with health services as a local school around what can we, what are our options, especially regarding screening as a larger school community, with 60%, around 60% planning to return in person. So we are there. That's part of what the district is reviewing and looking at what can meet the needs of our community. But the main thing is we want to make sure that students and staff with symptoms are identified through our screener. And so then we can connect them with health services and they are able to support this process until we have something in place at APS. And that includes, whether you've had an exposure on school grounds or outside of school grounds. We're connecting those. So learned a lot about contact tracing and just those fantastic conversations. And we'll continue, more will come from this. There will be more information. So again, all schools are expected to screen students, staff, contractors, volunteers when they enter the building. And that goes beyond, beyond the outside doors. So that will also include a temperature check. We have become thermometer connoisseurs. Ms. Heron has done a lot of great research on those so that we have thermometers that can last outside in the cold and the rain. We've had both on our Wednesdays. So we're able to do the assessments with parents, which has just been very helpful in getting the questions answered. Because asking kindergartners, have you been around anybody with COVID? Sometimes they shrug. Parents are like, no, we've not been around anybody with COVID in the last 14 days. Again, we follow the Department of Public Health and CDC guidelines around all PPE. And things that are available to our classrooms are the sanitizing stations, disinfectant spray bottles, paper towels have been installed, and again, additional face masks is needed for replacement. So once again, I'm going to put a plug because we've had some folks join. If you are planning to have your child return to in-person, please have them practice over the break wearing a mask for long periods of time. It must cover your nose to your chin. So it's got to cover the nose and the mouth. Best place is make sure the nose is covered all the way down below the chin. At all times, make sure you got the right fit. Even on the disposable masks, sometimes I have to have some kind of loop in the back or twist because I'm a smaller person and these are one size fits all. So my husband, who is much taller than I am, the masks all fit great. They don't necessarily fit on me, so I have to make adjustments. You can also get adjustable ear loops with some of the reusable masks. Again, we've stepped up our cleaning game. I will say the buildings have never been cleaner, and we're constantly evaluating what that means for us as we, have had students in, had more teachers in, where we not had to really step up our game because it's been very quiet and we need to now. That's, those are things that we're using this time to think through. When you get your child, sometimes I call out the temperature and a lot of times parents are like, that's really low. It is a surface temperature, so it's not necessarily an internal temperature check, but it's as long as they're in that green zone, they are good to go. We are going to make sure that we share the screening questions with our community. Again, they're the same questions the CDC has published, just so you all can screen your children at home. And if your child is not feeling well or has, would not pass the screener in person, that would be really great, to keep them at home for that day. Again, err on the side of caution right now instead of potentially larger ramifications down the road. And what I'm hearing from my friends whose children have returned to in-person, either independent or public, as well as some families here who have connections to preschools, they're seeing a lot more families err on the side of caution for the greater good because they want to keep those schools open and keep them clean. For everyone, the self-screening should help you to make those decisions before you get on, put your child on a bus, let your child walk or ride a bike, or come up to the school in a car, just so that, we can, again, focus, we can make sure that the people we're bringing in are healthy and safe, and we, are not necessarily using or stretching our staff, which is already pretty, we've got a lot of teachers, but pretty lean, even further. So some of these are things that we have access to in different places. Some are available across the board, but these are our PPE specs. So we do have what's called a care room. It's essentially an isolation room for students who develop COVID symptoms throughout the day, or maybe come to school and that was not the right choice. They're isolation rooms away from the majority of our teachers and our students and our staff. They will be manned, and folks in there will have some additional PPE to keep, whoever's in there watching students will have additional PPE, because again, we want to keep as many people healthy and safe as possible. We do have face shields available, but they do not work in lieu of a face mask. So some departments are buying teachers the clear face mask. For those that do not get them, we're looking at sourcing for all teachers, because I do see on Wednesdays when our students come in, it's a little jarring. They've seen us on screen, they've seen us in real time, and then they only see our eyes, and they're a little confused. So some things we're looking at are buttons with our faces on them to help recognize, so that the kids can recognize us. The same thing where maybe we need lanyards like they do at the preschool that are color coded to help kids get to their correct zone, because they too will be covered. One thing I did not mention last night, but I will add it to my end of week letter that I'm going to send out, is in addition to practicing wearing a mask, have your children almost practice, you might think take them outside for this, but shouting in their mask, because the mask does muffle. So in the mornings when we're asking questions, some of our kids all naturally speak in a softer voice, and the mask muffles even more. So as we think about returning to school, we're going to have to maybe practice a little projection, which is not always a bad thing. Maybe don't use yell, but project your voice, speak a little louder, and teaching kids when it's appropriate to use different tones and different volume levels. Same thing, we're going to continue sanitizer, disinfectant, soap and water. We are very excited that the district was able to secure through a grant 2 portable sinks that we can use in our care rooms, and we do have a few classrooms that may not have access to a sink, so we're looking at options for them as well. So we do have some questions in the chat. I'm going to move it over so I can see. Is there a website recommended for mask straps? I don't have one. I've sourced everything. Oh, School Mask Straps looks pretty good. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Dr. Law. I've sourced most of my stuff through Amazon, so it's a lot of, for me, trial and error. Another great tip, and it will come up later, would be mask lanyards are also a great idea. That way, when your kids do get opportunities to remove their masks, maybe outside or at lunch, we don't have a pile of masks, but they're just hanging neatly from their neck, much like we used to wear sunglass lanyards back in the day. Is there any effort to purchase voice amplifiers for teachers? Yes, that came up in the spring, and so our COVID task force, which includes some teachers, parents, and administrators, we are almost creating a wish list or a needs list for those things. The biggest things that are on there are, again, clear masks, voice amplifiers, individual math manipulatives, because that's something that I know is crucial. Do we need some type of technology for what's affectionately called roomy zoomy, again, where you're doing the simultaneous teaching? And though, you know, how can we make sure that everyone still feels connected and has equal access to the instruction in the classroom? So someone asked about the 100. I encourage you all to go back and listen to the superintendent in the fall, and you know, she has stated throughout this reopening process that the number of cases per 100,000 is an indicator, but not the only indicator. And that is why we are focusing so heavily on the mitigation strategies. Yesterday, in addition to this PowerPoint, you all received a summary of a much larger document that I'm working on as part of our reopening plan. I think we're up to 40 or 50 pages now. And it includes details for me of room capacity, kids that want to come back, like the numbers that want to come back per classroom. And so I'm having to look at how can I, as part of our reopening strategy, mitigate any risk factors. Social distancing is important, and we do have to speak directly to that. Katya, there's one question in Spanish, and I get a little bit, but I'm not sure I can fully understand it. So if you could type the question in the chat in English, I want to make sure I answer all questions. And while I wait on that, aftercare, Kim Bishop, I've not connected with Kim Bishop, but throughout the reopening process, and you know, her desires to open up, I believe once we are open, our hope is that they will also be able to reopen. So I will connect with her and get additional guidance from APS, but that has been the case to date, that aftercare providers cannot open until schools open, has been our guidance. What's going to happen with the bus? Is it only going to be one? Thank you for that question. As part of your reopening, your declaration of intent survey, you will need to specify if you plan to utilize the bus. If you do, or if you think you might use the bus, please go ahead and opt in now. Once the survey window closes, it is closed until the 4th 9 weeks. So sometime in March, it should, end of February, beginning of March, it should reopen. And that will be the next time that you can answer questions around learning environment as well as transportation. So once transportation has the students that plan to ride the bus, they will go through and look at those routes and make the needed adjustments. So hopefully we don't have super crowded buses and buses with only 3 children on them. For our intervention program, I will say that every bus driver gets a list of kids at each stop so that they know exactly who they are supposed to receive on that school bus at any given time. So that has been very, very helpful. Specifically, you know, it's kept us, it also helps us when kids are not on the bus driver is able to let us know, like, these 3 kids didn't get on the bus today, and we make those phone calls just to check on them. All right, so everyone wants to know, what is the plan? The APS proposal at this point includes up to 4 days a week of face-to-face instruction. That's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. If you would like to remain virtual, you will still have 4 days a week of live instruction, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Wednesdays will be asynchronous for all students, regardless of your learning modality, learning environment. For Sarah Smith, we will continue with our morning meetings and small group interventions. We also hope to have some additional specials offerings in the afternoons. They've been really great at pitching in and helping us through the holiday concert and doing some wellness exercises with our students who want to participate in that. Because I recognize, as a parent, working parent myself, some people want Wednesdays as a true technology break, they're done, and some families need the structure of the day. So we're trying to combine the best of those worlds for everyone. Again, our deep cleaning right now is more on a Thursday basis, but because of our intervention plan, but once we switch to this schedule, it will be on Wednesdays. So the buildings will be very, very limited. And everyone will return to our traditional school hours, 8:30 to 2:30. Again, whether you are virtual or in person, you will be back on a longer day. So for our younger learners at the beginning of the year, we did decrease our minutes. Some of that is based on best practices for virtual instruction, and just it would definitely felt overwhelming, especially for students who are just starting school in kindergarten. So that will be something that as families, if you remain virtual, need to consider as well. That's going to be a longer day on screens for our students. So how does that look? For everybody, I encourage you to practice having your child practice sitting, like in January we return until it's face-to-face, like sit in one, if you're not already doing this, and many of you are, sit in the same place every day. We don't have our cat on screen. I know I bring my pets on the new show, but limit those. Just really think about what's expected to sit through a day at school, because the more that we practice that, the better this transition will be. It's the same thing that happens to us every time we have summer break or a winter break, or even the week-long fall breaks we used to have. It took a minute to get kids back in the routine. That's fine, we expect that, but this has been a much longer time. It's going to need a lot more practice. And when I'm saying this, I'm also saying this to myself, because I am in the exact same boat of trying to get my middle schooler back into many of these school habits. So the 60% question. For schools that have 60% or greater, 60% or more families request in-person instruction, we have flexibility to modify our instructional model, which means hybrid, if we are not able to meet those COVID-19 mitigation strategies and safety protocols. So at Sarah Smith, we are looking at, are our rooms able to hold the students who want to return in each homeroom, or do we need to maybe keep kids on the same team but adjust slightly for those that have to do roomy zoomy? Do we need to look at rooms with larger capacity for some of our classes, especially DLI, where the majority of students want to return, and there really aren't options to adjust the class rosters? Maybe both are close to the max, or they're full class returning, and it's not like there's another teacher I can shift somebody to. So DLI will most likely be roomy zoomy, and we may have to look at some alternative spaces for them, different classrooms. We like to keep kids in zones, but that's keeping kids safe right now is the biggest factor for me. In terms of, I've said all along, carpool and arrival and dismissal at the primary campus is just going to have to be reworked. So we have partnered with APS Transportation. They came out last Friday, and they're coming out this Friday as well. I hope, fingers crossed, hopefully see a lot of big buses driving through the neighborhood to practice getting through different parts of our campus and figure out where can we unload safely and efficiently and provide more capacity for carpool, either running two different lines or running the line there in a different place. Same thing with walking. We're going to have to rework how people walk so that we don't have the potential for people to get hit in that driveway there. Over here, not as much will change. I'm at the intermediate campus day, so not as much will change, but how many people do we need? Are there opportunities for parents to volunteer with carpool and things like that to keep the traffic flowing, and then get our kids so that our staff can be used to efficiently monitor students so that we can keep those mitigation strategies in place and continue to practice wearing a mask. We do have a tool that helps me figure out this is the square footage of a classroom. If I need to maintain 6 feet of social distancing, here's, account for the person, account for teacher, account for room, like walls, things on the wall, shelving and whatever. What does that look like? What's the number? And then I'm going to give a huge shout out to Jessica Heron. She and I have modeled several classrooms around the building just to make sure that what we're able to recreate in a space matches these tools. So we're not just relying on a computer model. I'm a little kinesthetic. I need to see things in action and make sure that it all fits in a couple different models. So they align pretty close. So it's just, what furniture just do we not need, or we're not going to be able to keep, so we can get those things out of rooms and get our kids social distance, keep our kids safe. So for us, again, asynchronous Wednesdays. For students, it's independent learning, intervention, again, morning meetings, and we're looking at some enrichment opportunities. Our teachers and staff are going to be engaged in a lot of professional learning. Again, they're pulling kids for intervention. It might be virtually will be virtually once we return. And then planning and preparation for simultaneous teaching. Again, that is part of our strategy. We're taking everything grade by grade and case by case, but your teachers, I just have to give a shout out. They love your kids and they want to keep their class. They're just, even in this virtual space, so bonded and connected with them. And we want to make sure that we honor that. We also have to think big picture, what's ultimately in everyone's best interest. So those are questions that we're not going to be able to answer immediately, but we hope to get to parents in January. Once I have all my teacher data in. Our district, if you need support, we have the meal delivery, there's deep cleaning, and again, the COVID testing and support with our health services department. So for declaration of intent, the survey window opened on December 3rd and it will close December 21st. That way, if a family enrolls, they're able to be activated in our system, and they're able to complete that survey window, because that survey within the window. I'm going to try to get this right. If you made your declaration in the first survey, whatever you decided then, you completed your survey, you like your choices for both instructional environment as well as transportation, you are good to go. Those surveys are still in our system, still recorded. I still have access to those in the dashboard exactly as they were. If you want to change one of those things, maybe you wanted to quarantine between Thanksgiving and Christmas, or Thanksgiving and the winter break because you wanted to visit other relatives, but that's not a factor in the return in January. So you went virtual for our first survey, you need to change to in-person. Please go on and do that immediately. Don't wait. Same for transportation. Maybe you thought like, we'll carpool so that we can free up bus seats for other students. We can help across the district. And then you came to trunk or treat or our holiday drive-through and you're like, this is going to take forever. Maybe I do want an option for the bus. You need to go ahead and select that at this time as well. But if you made your choice, you like your choice, you're good with your choice, continue, you are good to go. If you select face-to-face and you realize that that is not what's in your family's best interest, either for some reason, maybe the PPE requirements are not working with your family, or it's a lot. It's not what you remember from previous. We are looking, you can go back to the virtual option. However, if you start virtual, the only time you'll be able to opt into in-person will be for the 4th 9 weeks on the next survey. If you did not complete a survey at all in the fall, and you do not fill out a survey at this time, you will be defaulted to virtual. And your next option to complete a survey will be before the 4th 9 weeks. So what are your choices? We have 3. These are the same 3 that we have shared in previous meetings. The first is a Sarah Smith virtual option. Students will continue to work with staff at Sarah Smith. Their day will be 8 to 2:30, so it's a regular instructional day, and that begins once students return to in-person learning. That is option 2. Students will come to in-person learning 4 out of 5 days. Wednesdays will remain asynchronous, and students return to a traditional school schedule of 8 to 2:30. Ava Junior, I've had several inquiries about this, and we do have a couple of families at Sarah Smith that made this selection at the beginning of the year. This is a little more flexible than our Sarah Smith virtual option, and so some families, again, like the structure, and some families like a lot more flexibility. I'm hearing that from middle schoolers in particular right now, but just it is an option for our families. So I encourage you, if that's something you need to look at, to contact the Atlanta Virtual Academy office for more information. They had several webinars over the summer, and they're great. They can share those. We do have some more questions in the chat. So as part of our reopening strategy, we're planning for everything. We are trying to look at how we can make carpool more efficient, how we can, get our parents to help with pre-screening. Even I encourage families to go ahead and take temperature checks at home as well before you bring to school, just so that does cut down on our time. I will also share, and I'm going to share in my notes, but I've got my little list right here. Things that can help us in carpool. We're going to probably solicit some parent volunteers, so families who want to volunteer, and they're used to coming in the building and doing that. We probably will need help with carpool, more unloading students and getting them to the correct entry point for the building. The same thing with guiding our walkers or guiding our bus riders, so not necessarily the screening, but any help we can get. I will say, after doing it for 3 weeks, things that kids are used to doing, like you do the big goodbye as you get to the door, you're just unbuckling, you grab those are things that we're going to encourage you to use the time you're waiting for your screening to go ahead and get ready. So again, that's a hard lesson. I'm still working on it with one of my middle schoolers, but trying to get your kids prepped to get out of that car quickly once that screening process happens will also help us cut down on our time and be a little more efficient. We are looking at options for bringing kids, if we could start carpool a little earlier, or if we, need to start dismissal earlier, but our teachers do have hours that they're set to work, and so we can't, unlike previous years, I couldn't just bring everybody in and put them in the cafeteria, or bring everybody in and set them in the auditorium, because we have to maintain the social distancing. So we, as I said, we run a lean staff. We're going to be we're going to do the best we can and continue to improve, but we just ask that people are patient, just like you are in the first few weeks of school. Carpool at the PC, I think, started at over 45 minutes my second year here, to get all parents through in the afternoons, and it got down to less than 20-25 minutes by the time that we pushed we gained efficiencies and everyone kind of got back in that routine. So while it's the middle of the school year, it will be like the beginning of the school year for those coming in person. Expand on the options being considered for rooms with greater 60% capacity, like DLI. What is Roomie Zoomie? So Roomie Zoomie is really simultaneous teaching, and for all of our DLI classes, that is the default option. It's not necessarily what I think anyone wants, but a lot of our neighboring districts are doing all Roomie Zoomie. That means that some students are in person, some students are virtual, and the teacher has the technology to interact with both groups. So again, thanks to our Sarah Smith Education Foundation and our PTO, as we look at our needs assessment for a successful reopening, things like upgrading to cameras that can pivot with the students. I think they're called OWL cameras that can move with the teacher and the students, so that the students at home can be engaged and really feel like part of the classroom, and the students in person, again, it feels a little more normal. It's not what I think some folks were talking about earlier, where you just come to school and you log onto your Zoom and your teacher logs onto their Zoom and you're just here. That's not what is best for students. So we want to minimize that when possible. Does it mean that kids will never be on technology at school? It does not. We still have things where we use technology. It will just be more in line with how we normally run a lot of our technology. Plus, you know, going a lot more paperless with turning in work, because again, we want to minimize that contact touch. I'm sorry if this has been said, but will a hybrid model be considered if we are above 60% face-to-face? So we are looking at, I mean, that's part of what I'm doing. As I've sent out a letter earlier this week. At this time, I will not, I have access to ongoing student information. So as parents complete their survey or change their selection, I get that in real time. So I've seen those numbers adjust slightly. I kind of know where I think we're going to end up landing, and I'm planning accordingly. However, I also will not know which teachers are able to come back until after the new year starts. The deadline for teachers to apply for telework is January the 4th. I've asked them only to share with me their intent, if that's something that they want to, that they are considering or they plan to do. But that is an option that's available to them. I also asked that our parents, and you know, I'm not asking if they are going to be virtual or in person, just because, like everyone on this call, we love and value our teachers, and we just want to make sure that they're healthy and safe and making a decision that meets their current needs in terms of their health, rather than feeling like they, you know, have to make a choice one way or the other. So it's for me, it's almost an HR thing. I want to make sure that our staff is able, you know, feel supported throughout this process the same way we want to make sure our families feel supported throughout this process. So we don't know, but I'm looking at every scenario. And again, once I know if I have the staff to run 4 days, that will be a strong consideration, or we must go to hybrid, which would be the 2 days and 2 days. But I'm planning in real time, not just waiting on these numbers. We're constantly moving charts and graphs and people around. For the virtual option with Sarah Smith staff, will virtual learning be simultaneously with the same teacher, or will they be with a different teacher? It could be a little bit of both, and it could depend on a particular grade level and what the needs are within that grade level. So I've asked our leadership team and our grade levels to really talk through the options. We've talked as a staff around the pros and cons of both, either simultaneous teaching or looking at shuffling class lists, and really trying to weigh on what's in the best interest of everybody, particularly our students. So again, as the part of that factor will be like what happens with telework and teachers. But you know, so I can't make a hard, fast decision, but we're looking at both of those scenarios right now. Will dismissal be staggered across campuses? Not feeling comfortable with the bus, but I have a child at each campus. Again, as we get into this, I don't think there will be different, because we do still share our buses, like a 2:30 here and a 2:45 at the primary campus or vice versa. But we've done some legwork thanks to our PTO, past presidents, Christine Wiggum and Kirsten Fianti, with different dismissal apps that will help us social distance throughout the dismissal process. We're also, again, we're 5-ish minutes away, so parents should be able to effectively get from one to the other. But we do, I will say, tend to start moving our younger learners a little earlier, traditionally, because it just takes them longer to get from point A to point B. So we want to support that in there, support them with that. If a parent chooses face-to-face, can the child show up at school at any point during the quarter, or is there a cutoff time by which the child must show up to be considered face-to-face? I do not know the answer to that question, but I will ask. I will say for enrollment, we look at a 10-day count, but I do not know that this particular question has come up. So I will ask that question. If you could send that to me in an email at emily.boatwright@aps.k12.ga.us, or you can go to the PTO website and email, or our website and email. They will shoot it over to me. That's a great question. I want to make sure I capture it and get an answer back to you. All right, Katya, I have another question. My son has asthma. Can he go to class when he is coughing? I will say that COVID symptoms will trigger potential movement to the care room or being asked to go home. So the more information that we have, more medical information we have on file regarding conditions that might mimic COVID and be exacerbated would be very helpful, so that we can plan a strategy for each individual child. Again, keep the mask on, and I encourage you to have several backup options for masks as well, so that those can be rotated out. So what has changed to date? Again, as I stated earlier, we love our parents, we love our volunteers from both our community, like our actual parent community and our larger community, but we want to focus our screening efforts and our potential contact tracing efforts on our students and staff within the building. And the more folks that we bring in, the more folks we have to spend a lot of time and effort screening, and then should something happen, going back and contact tracing. So when we're talking around 60+% of over 800 children plus the staff, that's a fairly large number. Right now we need to limit our visitors. So things that we're used to doing just are not going to be the same. I know that I like to walk my kids to class, and I miss, I liked going and doing birthday parties in the cafeteria, and those just are not going to be available right now. Hopefully things will change at some point, and we can resume some of the activities that we're used to, or we can figure out how to do them in new ways. But for right now, getting kids in, keeping them healthy and safe, and then returning them home is our top priority. So again, walk students up, carpool up, and do all the big goodbyes at that point. You still have your same transportation options. So we have bus, car, bike, walking. We will make sure that we're working on signage at both campuses to route people to a different entrance depending upon mode of transportation. That's what's worked best at intervention. And we're going to see if that's, something that we can scale up to support our students and families. So when your students come back face-to-face, they will almost remain in their little bubble or cohort. So students will go to their homeroom. They will remain with their homeroom for the vast majority of their day. In the early stages, we may have more teacher movement than student movement. Classes will go to the restroom together in their little bubble, so teachers can effectively monitor and maintain social distancing. Students will not be able to share materials. So our teachers are thinking around, do you need a crate under the desk? Do you need a pencil box with everything in it? How can we make sure that materials, where we're used to having, the basket of crayons or the caddy of scissors, we can't do those things anymore. So students need their own. Students will need to bring a device to school each and every day that's fully charged. the hope or the plan, APS did spend a chunk of the CARES Act money on leasing devices, which is going to help us so that those will remain at school and our students will have their either personal device or one that they are borrowing from Sarah Smith at home to do work, so we can stop the back and forth. But until those are just, rolled into buildings, we will need the devices. Even if we're not on computers as much, we still have things like benchmark testing, STAR testing. There's some times when our teachers want to utilize some of the programs we have, like Lexia, Freckles, Zern. So we do need those devices. I'm going to give one more shout out to our Sarah Smith Education Foundation, because throughout March and then into August, we were very fortunate as a school to have the devices available so that we could ensure all student needs are met. And we've been, I've talked to several of my colleagues and they're just not in that same position. So we're just very, very fortunate that we've been able to do that. So thank you, thank you. I'm also really happy that APS is taking on this lease so that those Sarah Smith funds can be used for different means moving forward. Students will also need to bring materials like your if you're using your Eureka Math workbook, anything that's needed for homework, but then you will use in class, it needs to come back every day. So think around a sturdier backpack. Does it have the size and the capacity that kids need so they're not carrying lots of things in their hands? What's going to be the most comfortable, again, to maneuver back and forth? And again, practice. I can't say it enough. That's going to help everyone make this transition smoothly. Students will be social distanced in their classrooms. That means that they will be spread apart. Things that we're used to doing, like sitting at tables. We did a big push over the years of some non-traditional seating, switching from individual desks to tables. We do a lot with the carpet in our, especially K2. Those things are just not options right now. In the interventions, when we're down to, 5 kids in a classroom and they can be 6 feet apart on a carpet, that's okay. We will not be able to do that when we even get into, 10, 15. So those are things that we can't do. Again, sharing of supplies and consistent wiping down of high touch surfaces will be crucial. Again, as part of our initial reopening, students are not going to go to the cafeteria. That was something that was stated in October, and we are gonna eat in classrooms. Again, let's start more restrictive and really make sure we get everything down and figure out where we have room to open up to say. But I know from my experience, if we don't start that way, it will be harder to transition back to a more restrictive environment. It feels real punitive once you've been in a building and you've been able to have a lot of freedom. It will still feel punitive for kids that have been here for a while, but because of the space we're in, we've got the opportunity to make sure that we're putting the mitigation strategies and the safety measures in place, and then we can look for different opportunities. We may also look at opportunities to eat outside at both campuses. So we've been busy prepping different outdoor spaces so that students and staff can utilize those. So for example, over at the intermediate campus, which probably is more landlocked than the primary campus, we've got some green areas outside of our playground area. We've got the garden. We're looking at potentially, expanding into our largest green patch and doing a deck and some terrace seating as a wish list item. At the primary campus, we've had some major upgrades that will help with this. The PTO did the courtyard landscaping and putting out, like redoing the concrete, the walkway, that can make it both kind of an outdoor classroom, but also a lot more walkable and user-friendly for classes transitioning. The deck has been replaced at the primary campus, so it's safe And then my most exciting moment is both of our portable units at the primary campus are gone. And we did keep one of the two like slabs so that we can repurpose that either as seating space, an outdoor obstacle course, or something to be utilized, during this as we need to be more flexible with our outdoor spaces. All of our water fountains have been closed. Again, we're excited that our PTO went ahead and purchased those bottle filling stations. Not every school has access to bottle filling stations at every water fountain, so we're definitely very fortunate there. Social distance, so signage in hallways, on floors to delineate social distancing, traffic patterns, if stairwells are up or down at the intermediate campus. Again, teachers continuing to monitor that, hand sanitizing, and then again, limiting students in restrooms. So marking off every other stall, every other sink, every other urinal, having some type of physical notation outside the restroom of whether or not there's space available. And teaching our students to practice being patient. If you can't get in, just wait outside, and here's where you wait. Restrooms, and this is not really a lot new. Our restrooms are traditionally assigned based on proximity to class. Again, this is new, where teachers will need to take their classes to the restroom to ensure that students have those opportunities instead of what we're used to, kids, I need to go to the restroom, and they're able to leave. Those will be for emergencies only. We want to make sure our students have access, but again, we don't want opportunities for kids to not follow social distance guidelines or meet their capacity thing. And they're kids. This is something the adults have to really help manage. Masks will still need to be worn, and then working with our custodial staff to ensure our restrooms are cleaned frequently. Recess is a big one again. So we're looking at, like I said, with the outdoor spacing, some non-traditional places to hold recess, as well as on a rotation schedule so that kids get to go to different areas throughout their week, so that it's not that the first class out always gets the jungle gym or always gets the basketball court, but there's a rotation so that kids can have different opportunities. This is one thing that we continue as a North Atlanta cluster to really talk about and debate, because it's also the time when kids do tend to clump up together. It's play, and so that's all very natural. So it's how can we effectively manage that and keep, we're doing all these other mitigation strategies. We don't want it to fall apart at lunch, dismissal, arrival, and recess. So what does that mean for us? And, making sure that our teachers are, again, remain super vigilant. Mention the lanyards. And again, huge shout out to our PTO, our Sarah Smith Task Force parents, teachers, and administrators for being great thought partners and looking around our city, state, and the country, and what we can do to reopen safely, but also still have a whole child experience. Please, our next steps for you all, please make sure you complete the Declaration of Intent survey. If you need to, if you're a K2 family and you need help, Miss Portee, her email address is there, and I don't think I misspelled Atlanta this time, or Paula Webb for 3-5 families. All of us are certainly able to help. Jessica Heron has also been great. A lot of you guys have reached out to her for technology and materials needs. So we are all here to support you through this. And if you have any questions that you either didn't answer or that come up after this, you can shoot them to me. Again, I may not have the answer. I want to be very clear. It doesn't mean that there's not a plan. We have been planning consistently since the first announcement to a reopening, and I didn't just stop or shelve that. We can, my group constantly talks around what does this look like? And we take into account the latest guidance that comes from CDC, Department of Public Health, again, what we're seeing in our neighbors. And so the plan is constantly evolving, but it's not that I'm waiting for these factors to start planning per se. So, but I just, I want to make sure that the plan I put out, some of the answers I put out are the answers. I know as a parent, it's frustrating when I think I have an answer and I'm happy, and then that changes. We're all understanding and forgiving, but when we know that sometimes has to happen, but the more that I can get you the final answer, I think we all just feel better in that space. So someone asked will there be a cap for classroom occupancy? So yes, each classroom, believe it or not, every classroom here is almost the exact same square footage, but they still might have different capacities based on the dimensions of the room. At the primary campus, it is, because it's been expanded and expanded, it's a little more, there's a lot more variation in the classroom size. So a classroom on one hall there might have a max capacity that is several children different than a classroom in a different part of the building. So when we're looking at, can we effectively bring all of our kids on and keep them safe and maintain mitigation strategies, we're going room by room by room by room, and trying, always trying to make sure that we give our teachers enough lead time if they are going to have to make a change in placement, so that they can be ready to receive students when we return. Are there any additional questions? Monica, I don't see the third grade question. Oh, is there an opportunity for third graders to visit the IC before reopening so they can familiarize themselves with the layout? I got it now. We're talking around a couple of different things. The last intervention day that we have right now is January the 6th. So I'm not certain that we will have an opportunity to bring all third graders on, but we are looking at how we can get that information to you all to help. We're also gonna, as I tried to say earlier, have a lot of people in the hall to help students navigate the building, as well as color code different zones. So if my color is blue, but I'm in the red zone, the people there can immediately see and help point me in the right direction with signage. So just, I've got some parents that have worked on some plans at other schools, and that's been one thing that's really helped, along with making sure their students have some signage on for themselves that helps identify where they belong. I know it's not ideal, but that's, those are things that we're looking at. So gate, again, once I know my teacher status, I'll be able to answer questions around gate. ESL is a daily intervention. With gifted and talented, we have a little more flexibility in how we've served those students. And what we've done is worked well in the virtual space. We now have to figure out what's best for this new space too, where we're doing both site-based and face-to-face instruction, site-based virtual face-to-face instruction. So we are looking, that the teacher telework status and student return rate will play into a lot of our service models. All right, if there are no further questions, I want to thank you all. You're a great audience. We will post this recording. I'll get with our PTO to make sure that it's available publicly. And if, again, if there are any questions that come up, we'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you all for being great early birds, and have a great day.